Hello class, sorry for the long wait, but we're back with another lesson and it's one that I think a lot of you will find helpful. So with that, let's get into a lesson that is the toggle button. Now before I get into too much about the toggle button, I feel I should explain what it is first. In summary, the toggle button or toggle is what lets you see if you have something that can be activated at any one point in time. A good example of this would be when you have a trap guard that can be activated. Without the toggle, you have no idea that you could activate something fast enough. Now, in real life, you would still have the chance to go, wait, I have something that can be activated to stop that. But in Duel Links, you can't do that. So with the toggle, you have the ability to. Now, if you're wondering if this is already turned on, then yes. It's that little button in the left lower corner that says auto on it. That is the starting version of the toggle button. Now, before I talk more about the toggle, let's talk about how to turn it on. To turn on the toggle all the way, you have to do the following. 1. From the home screen, look at the top right hand corner and click on the gear symbol. This will lead you to different settings of the game. Go to the settings section of the screen. This takes you to the settings menu. Now that you're in the settings menu, there will be two different setting menus. One is for the main screen like sound, battery life, and graph. Once you switch over to dual settings, you're going to want to find the following section. Activation confirmation. You'll see that it's set to auto. Change that to toggle button. Once you do this, you'll be set to start learning a skill that will help you from this point forward when you're in rank, duel rooms, and even in tournaments. At this point, pause the lesson and get this done so you don't forget. Don't worry, I'll be here when you're done. Okay, now that you're done turning on the toggle, the rest of this lesson will be focusing on how you use the toggle and the different skills and or techniques that you're going to use with it. Note, there is going to be some terms I'm going to be using that may get lost as I go through this lesson. I'll try to explain each one the best I can, but if I forget to do so, then leave a comment down below and I'll try to explain it the best I can. That's also the same for any questions you may have about the toggle as well. Now with that said, let's get started. To get started, let's understand how the toggle is actually used. Now lucky us, it's not overly hard to figure out how the different settings of the toggle button work. So the toggle has three settings, auto, on, and off, that work in the following way. For auto is the mode that will do the bare minimum when it comes to telling you when something can be activated. An example of this is you having a trap on the field. Said trap will more than not only activate during the start of the main phase, the start of the battle phase, and the start of the end phase, and that's it. Meaning that you end up only having a chance to react to what your opponent plays in a very small window. The off button, this makes it so absolutely no activation will show up during yours or your opponent's turn. With the on mode, makes it so you can activate your effects at every opportunity that is available, making you able to activate an effect at just the right moment for that maximum amount of damage. Now the way you change from one mode to the next is by simply clicking on said button till you get the one you want. Said modes change from the following order: auto, off, on, then back to auto. Now that we know how the toggle works, we can go into the really fun stuff. That's right, the skills and techniques that come with making use of the toggle. The first skill I'll talk about is why you should even care to use the on and off part of the toggle button over the auto. The first I'll go over is the on part of the toggle. Now it may seem pretty simple. I mean, you want the toggle on so you can activate your cards, right? Well, there's more than just simply turning it on and just going. You see, when the toggle is on, this means that every activation that you can make is prompt. This means that for one phase, you can have a prompt for a card about a dozen times. And that's just one phase. Now, that's just the weakness of doing it, because each prompt takes about 1 second at minimum to show up and then deny. Due to this, if you're not careful, you can time out. Now again, that's the weakness of using on, but the benefits, 150% make that worthwhile. See, while you have so many prompts, you get the chance to activate your cards at times that you don't with auto. A good example of this can be laid at the feet of two cards. Forbidden Chalice, and World Legacy Clash. Now, for those that don't know what these cards do, I'm going to bring them up now. Now, first off, these cards have one thing in common. They're both a quick play spell. So when you combo that with the toggle, you end up getting the following example why having the toggle on can win you or lose you a game. Now, the reason these effects are so important is the fact you can use them in the battle phase. That means we end up getting what is known as an interaction. In this case, the interaction for both cards happens in the damage step. When you're playing in a match, it would be something like what you see on the page. With us using the quick play spell cards and having a toggle on, we get to activate those cards in the damage step. In doing so, we get an interaction that either lets us do more damage to your opponent than normal. In the case of Chalice, using it in a combo with Mask Hero Anki to attack the opponent directly for 1300 attack. In the case of Clash, letting you banish a monster and causing your opponent's monster the ability to attack a different target. Now, at this point, you may be asking, so what? What's the difference from auto? The difference is that with auto, those cards would have activated at the beginning of the battle step, and when a card is declaring attack. This means that the battle step and the damage step go unchallenged. Due to this, Anki would have not been able to attack directly, instead would have been only a 3200 beat stick for a turn. And Clash would have only bashed your monster, and your opponent would have been able to change the attack from that banished monster to a different target, in doing so maybe losing you the game. That difference from auto to on can be the deciding factor of a win or a loss. Now on the flip side, we have the off button for the toggle. Now I'm sure a lot of you are thinking to yourself, why would I even need to know anything about the off part of the button? It's not that important, right? Well, you would be absolutely wrong. The off mode is as important as the on, if not more so. You see, while you have the toggle set to off, none of your activations will prompt. This means that you don't have to sit there for the next 10 seconds over and over again telling the game that you don't want to activate that card or effect. Trust me, that gets boring real quick. Now, as a byproduct of this part of the off mode, certain things become apparent. One of those things is the fact you can hide your cards from your opponent. That's right, I say you can hide cards from your opponent by having the off mode on. What I mean by hiding your cards deals with the fact traps, quick play spells, and some other monster effects will go off a lot if their activation requirement is active. Now, an experienced player can tell when these activations occur, when the game will lag or delay when this happens. A good example of this would be when your opponent has a Sphere Karibo in hand. Now, there is more to the effect, but for this topic, it's not needed. Now, when you attack an opponent with this card in hand, there will be a slight delay in time. This delay is the game asking your opponent if they want to activate Sphere Karibo. Now, if they had their toggle set to off, what would happen instead of a delay is nothing at all, and you would still attack, but you would have no idea they even had the card in the hand in the first place. In essence, hiding the card from you till just the right moment. Now, while using that same technique, let's say your opponent sets 2 cards in their spell and trap zone. You end up summoning a monster and there's a delay when you do so. This is an instant red flag because it's now telling you that your opponent has something they can activate when you have a monster out. Now, if they had the toggle off, you would not have had any delays and you would have kept making plays, not really realizing they had something to disrupt you. This is the biggest thing about having the toggle off. It's the ability to make your opponent second guess what they're going to do because of the unknown. Now, with that said, this is another trick you can make use of if you want to play some mind games with your opponent. If you're fast enough and you think you can pull it off, you can do what is known as a false positive. The basic idea with this is to leave the toggle on for a second to make a delay, then turn it back off again. And through the match, do this every once in a while. What this does is make your opponent have to figure out what your cards are that are causing said delay. If you do this right, you can make your opponent misplay without even realizing it until it's too late. Now that we know how to use the toggle button, let's talk about some information that ties into it. In this case, the way to tell what type of delay you're dealing with, and how to tell what the card may be that is making said delay. First one I want to cover is the hourglass. Now, I'm sure you have seen the hourglass that shows up next to your opponent's name. That hourglass tells you that your opponent is using their time. So it's a good idea to try watching out for it, especially when it's your turn and at the start of your opponent's turn, in this case the draw phase and the standby phase. During said phase, there should only be two things that can be activated in the standby phase, a quick play spell and a hand trap. Now, the best way to know if it's a quick play or a hand trap is to look at what you and your opponent have on the field. You have a spell or trap on the field, and that's it. It's a quick play that deals with your spells and trap cards. Now, on the flip side, you have cards in the graveyard but no spell and traps. It's possibly be a DD Crow or a Lancia or some other card like it. Now, if you see that hourglass during your turn, that is also a way to tell that your opponent has something that can be activated and they're thinking about it, or they're reading your cards because they have no idea what your cards do. When your opponent is reading your cards like this, you have a few seconds to think about what the card could be and what you can do to respond if it's played. So for your own safety, try to have a general idea on what the most played decks are able to do and how they work. This way, you don't have to give away too much to your opponent with one of these delays. Next up on how to call out a card in a delay is when your opponent plays spells and or traps cards face down. So how to call out a spell or trap that's face down. This takes you having a general knowledge of the popular cards in the game and what decks are being used the most as well. For those that are thinking this is a hard skill, it's not. What it is a skill that comes with time and practice. Now with that said, it also deals with having a little thing called deduction. The ability to put some information together to come up with a possible answer to what you know. That is pretty much the foundation of understanding any delay that you will come across. Deduction, knowledge, and understanding the game. Each of these are important for any duelist. Now with that said, let's get back to how to understand how to tell what a spell or trap is when you see or feel a delay. Now, when your opponent has a spell or trap face down, and there's a delay, you need to understand what could have set that off. Was it the fact your monster was just summoned? Was it the fact you have two monsters on the field? Is it because you have a spell or trap in your back row as well? All this and more could be the reason for you to feel a delay from your opponent. Now, some of the most common delays you will see are normally the spells and traps. Those are more than likely the reason for a delay from your opponent. Due to this, you need to do a quick process of elimination of what it could be. No cards in hand isn't a discard card effect. No cards in the graveyard doesn't have a graveyard effect that can be activated. I don't have a monster on the field isn't a card that deals with monsters on my side of the field. No back row means that card doesn't deal with back row. These are all questions that you'll break down very quickly. Again, this isn't a skill you will just have right away, but something over time. And don't be worried if you call out a card and it's not the card you called out, because there are thousands of cards in the game and it's always growing. So just being able to call out a card's delay and knowing it's among a certain group of cards when you feel said delay is a great skill and tool to have. Alright class, now with all that finished up, this is the end of the lesson for today. Now, I tried to cover as much as possible when it comes to the subject, but I may or may not have missed something when going over this lesson. Due to this, if you feel like I missed something or didn't go over something enough, please say so in the comments below and tell me what I missed. Other than that, I want to thank you all for coming to this lesson, and I hope you learned something new or you got the refresher you were looking for. With that said, class dismissed.